Alright, the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth hype train just keeps on rolling with our conductor Naoki Hamaguchi. The man does not rest. Apparently he might be an android like Chadley, because he doesn't seem to need any sleep. He just keeps on rolling. But he has done another interview, and in this one he talks about the characterization of Cloud and Sephiroth in the Nibelheim flashback, and how there's a lot more that they can do nowadays that they couldn't in previous iterations of the game because of the technology, but also how writing those characters and making sure that they're portrayed properly was important. And also he goes into a little bit about Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 and how that game is going to evolve in terms of its gameplay. If any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here and you'd like to stick around, you can subscribe as well. It's always appreciated. So this interview comes to us from, stay with me here, I'm gonna butcher the name of this website, Kakucho Puree. I'm pretty sure that sounded horrendous to native speakers, but that's the best I got. And in it, again, he talks about a lot of things, and we're gonna start off first with the Synergy battle system and how that was actually in development while they were doing the intermission DLC with Yuffie and Sonon, and how the basis of how it worked in the DLC was pretty much the blueprint of what they were going to do moving forward with Rebirth. And again, he brings up that it wasn't just a let's evolve the battle system kind of thing. The narrative called for it. Yuffie had a partner, that was Sonon, and she needed to be able to work with him to a specific degree in battle, not just with the story. And I loved the synergy stuff in the intermission DLC. It really spiced up combat. It was a bit of a bummer that we couldn't use Sonon ourselves, but still being able to issue him commands and then synergize with him and do these really spectacular looking, powerful attacks, whether they were the abilities or just your standard attack where you would do like the loop attack where Sonon and Yuffie would just swap places and jump up and down and hit the enemy. That stuff was really thrilling. But to know that they were developing that synergy system as well as the synergy system in Rebirth at the same time is pretty nuts. Up next, he talks about why Red 13 is riding a chocobo and not just running around on the ground. He goes on to say, there were two key factors influencing this decision. First and foremost, when we were conceptualizing the chocobo riding system, the designer in charge of it created an adorable design for Red 13 riding a chocobo. This design resonated with us as it added an endearing element that we believed players would appreciate in a character-driven game. We sought creative input from the game's director, Tetsuya Nomura, who also favored the idea, further solidifying our choice to include it in the game, which I really love. I know when they gave us the first official reveal trailer at Summer Game Fest, there was a quick shot of our party riding chocobos, but you couldn't see Red 13, so I had speculated maybe he just runs alongside everyone else and he doesn't need his own chocobo. And then, as fate would have it, we would see later on that he does in fact hop on the back of a chocobo in this really awkward position, and he just rides around with you guys. And it does make sense from a character standpoint because, again, Final Fantasy VII is a game that can be very serious, but it can also be very silly and goofy and lighthearted. And the idea of this poor lab rat dog having to arch his back to jump on a big chicken to ride around with the rest of the party is super endearing, and it just fits that world. Hamaguchi also goes on to say that one of the reasons they did that is because of the specific abilities of the chocobo, not just being able to run around, but being able to climb things and fly around. And if you had a situation where Red was the only one who couldn't get on a chocobo, then he'd be left behind, essentially, if you were to get on the blue sky chocobos and fly around. So you need your party to stay with you and keep intact, so it just made sense to have him hop on the back of these big chickens and ride alongside your party. And the image itself is just super adorable. Next up, they talk about the playful tone that Sephiroth has in the Nibelheim flashback, and they start to go more into the characterization of Cloud and Sephiroth in the Nibelheim flashback and how they crafted all of that stuff. Hamaguchi says, when we were working on the playable section in Nibelheim from 6 years ago, it wasn't just about Sephiroth, it also revolved around Cloud. We received various feedback and opinions regarding Cloud's character. Cloud is a character that's closely scrutinized, and Sephiroth, despite his formidable presence, remains a human being. Thus, portraying Sephiroth during that period was a complex task. As you might have observed while playing the demo, our aim was to highlight this aspect. When we decided to create Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we had two main reasons. First, we didn't intend to change the story, but rather utilize modern techniques to bring out elements that players might not have noticed in the original Final Fantasy Fantasy VII. This includes exploring the characteristics of Cloud and Sephiroth. They also follow up with the very playful puppy line from Sephiroth to Cloud in that demo as well by saying, "The warm reception of that scene was precisely what we had strived for. We dedicated considerable effort to fine-tuning Cloud's voice and facial expressions, ensuring they exuded a soft and relatable quality." So there's a lot to unpack there, but obviously without going into spoilers, when you look at the Nibelheim flashback, Cloud is acting very different from what we know. He's very out of character. He's much happier, more jovial, he's super spunky and perky and asks all these questions and wants to be a hero, which if you've played previous Final Fantasy games, you know what's going on there, but I don't want to spoil that for anybody. But Cody Christian, again, I gotta point out, he is nailing every aspect of Cloud, whether it's the Cloud we come to know from the main story or the Cloud we see in these flashbacks, and hearing him even pitch his voice up a little bit to sound higher and younger, he's doing an incredible job. And as far as Sephiroth goes, we don't really see too much of the pre-snap I've gone bad guy mode Sephiroth. I think the biggest chunk of that version of him we see is in Crisis Core, and it's kind of limited to a degree, but the bits that we do get, it's really wonderful. You know, exploring Sephiroth as a character while he's a good guy is something that I really want more, and Tyler Hoechlin, who voices Sephiroth, I think is doing a fantastic job based on what I've heard so far of differentiating between his evil, more subdued Sephiroth and the pre-snap Sephiroth, who's, you know, that good guy soldier who has friends that he cares about and just wants to do the right thing and be a hero, essentially. And going back on something we've been talking about a lot in previous videos, and that's hardware limitations that the original developers faced in the PlayStation 1 era. There was just so many different ideas that they probably had that they couldn't really add to the game because of hardware limitations or because of what they were working with. The things that they could express were very limited. Back then, we couldn't really see Cloud's facial expressions. We could just see him raise his shoulders and shrug and tilt his head, and we couldn't really get a sense of the good guy Sephiroth. But nowadays, we can see all that now. There's so much more nuance in the performance of the actors, in the writing, and in the facial capture and motion capture that they can fully realize these ideas now, and it's really awesome. And I am kind of hoping we get a lot more of the pre-snap good guy Sephiroth to some degree. I know they've really polished up his gameplay, which has led some people to believe that maybe we might be utilizing him in more than just the flashback, which I'm crossing my fingers for. Hello everyone, Future Curious Corduroy here, and I just wanted to pause the video really quick because as I was editing the next section of the video, I reread the article, and I think this next part might actually be a mistranslation on the part of the website. Somewhere along the way, the interviewer and Hamaguchi, some wires got crossed, and I think they thought he was referring to Remake Part 3, because he talks about the third installment, but he's talking about it in the past tense as if they've already made it and it's getting ready to come out, which obviously it's not, and then he starts talking about Rebirth. So I just wanted to throw this in here in case it does end up being a mistranslation error, but either way, what I'm about to say in the next part of the video still stands and it still makes sense. So back to the regularly scheduled program. And last but not least, Hamaguchi talks about this entire trilogy and speaks a little bit on Remake Part 3 by saying, "This Final Fantasy VII project is a trilogy, and to maintain player interest and excitement throughout, we knew the third game needed to offer a sense of evolution and surprise. We aimed to address player feedback, which included requests for a more open game experience, allowing players to explore the story as they wished. In Rebirth, we wanted to provide a greater degree of freedom, enabling players to choose their paths, be it in the main story or side quests. This approach allowed players to feel more in control of their journey, even if they didn't engage in every side quest. It was important to us that players could decide where to focus their attention." And speaking on that first part in regards to Remake Part 3, again, I think that pretty much means we're getting the high wind in Part 3, and we're going to be able to explore every single nook and cranny of the planet for side quests, summon materia, hidden battles, you name it. I think the only place we probably won't be able to go is Midgar, and that's because of story reasons. It's going to be locked away for us until the party needs to go back to handle some business with specific characters before the story itself can progress. But the idea of having the high wind and the go anywhere, do anything mentality and evolving the gameplay to allow us to do that is really exciting. And I'm also really intrigued to see how they evolve the combat even further in Remake Part 3 like they did in Rebirth. I'm not expecting Dissidia levels of maneuverability and crazy abilities and techniques and whatnot, but naturally they're gonna want to evolve that because the narrative is going to call for it. Bigger battles, bigger bosses, better pizza, Papa John's. Lots of crazy stuff to explore. to see the evolution of these different parts of the game where you start off in Midgar with Remake, which is super linear, but still offers some type of freedom in some areas, and then building upon that with Rebirth, which is going to be more open world, allow us to explore a good chunk of the planet, do a ton of side quests that some people might skip, some people might do, but the fact that they're there and they put so much effort into them is really interesting. And we're also looking at things like dialogue trees, which is going to allow the player again to feel more in control of what the conversation is and allow them to have more participation in the storytelling. Now, the one gripe I do have is that based on footage we've seen so far, when you get to those dialogue trees and you pick a specific option, Cloud doesn't then respond with that option. It just continues the conversation. So that's one thing that I hope evolves throughout the game, or maybe they change up in part 3, is that if I pick an option, I really would like to hear Cloud say that option out loud and then the conversation continues. But either way, it offers a really high degree of player choice and allowing us to feel like we're kind of shaping the narrative, be it in the main story or in the side quest stuff. And although there will be a lot of content there, you as the player can decide, I want to do this, but I think I'll pass on that. And then in subsequent playthroughs, maybe you change your mind and you want to do everything, or you want to do the stuff that you ignored in your first playthrough. So there's tons of stuff that they're really building up to for Rebirth and Remake Part 3, and a lot of it just sounds like it's going to be really exciting, and it's the right evolution for each specific part of the series. And seeing them upgrade combat and dialogue and side quests, not just to upgrade it, but because it's a narrative thing and it's calling for it, I think is really spectacular. Now with that being said, that is the video. Let me know in the comments down below how you guys feel about some of the things Hamaguchi said. What do you guys think in particular of the characterization of Cloud and Sephiroth in that Nibelheim flashback? And what expectations do you guys have personally for Remake Part 3? I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.